Hello everyone, and welcome back to Boss Economic World, where we slice through the jargon, fillet the talking points, and serve you the juicy truth behind the numbers. Today is October 23, 2025. And folks, the air is thick with the smell of tariffs. 6 months ago, President Donald Trump, back in the Oval Office, unleashed what his team called the Tariff-nado 2.0, a sweeping 55% levy on just about everything that says made in China. The pundits, the experts, the guys in suits on cable news, they all predicted Membrosia. They said Chinese exports to the US would fall off a cliff. They said the Chinese economy would be on its knees, begging for a deal. Well, it seems someone forgot to send Beijing the memo. Because right now, as we speak, a flotilla of container ships is chugging across the Pacific, carrying about $1 billion worth of Chinese goods to American shores. Every single day. In fact, September's numbers were even higher than August's. It's like watching someone try to stop a tidal wave with a picket fence. The water is still pouring through. So, what in the name of Adam Smith is going on? Did Trump's tariff cannon misfire? Or is this economic story a whole lot more complicated than a simple political slogan? Let's grab our magnifying glasses and follow the money. This is the story of the unbreakable supply chain. Now, to understand this, you have to understand what China is to the global economy in 2025. It's not just the world's factory. That's a 2010 way of thinking. China is the world's engineering department, its component warehouse, its chief procurement officer, and its logistics hub, all rolled into one. The Trump administration's strategy is based on a simple idea: if you make Chinese goods expensive, American companies will just buy them from somewhere else. From Vietnam, Mexico, India, heck, maybe even from a factory in Ohio. It's a nice thought. The problem is, for many critical industries, somewhere else doesn't exist. At least not yet. Let's start with the big one Trump himself keeps talking about: rare earths. This sounds like something out of a fantasy novel, but it's the bedrock of our modern tech. Those super strong, tiny magnets in your iPhone, your earbuds, the electric motor in a Tesla, and, most critically, in the guidance systems of an F-35 fighter jet? They're all made from processed rare earth elements. And China doesn't just mine most of them, it absolutely dominates the complex, dirty, and technically difficult process of separating and refining them. Over 90% of the world's refined rare earths come from China. The US has one major rare earth mine, Mountain Pass in California, but guess where it sends most of its concentrate to be processed? You guessed it. China. So, when you slap a 55% tariff on rare earth magnets, an American manufacturer of, say, a wind turbine, doesn't just say, "Oh, I'll call up our guy in Hanoi." There is no guy in Hanoi. They have two choices: pay the tariff, or stop making wind turbines. In the short term, they pay the tariff. It's the same story with pharmaceuticals. We're not talking about the finished pills in the orange bottle. We're talking about the active pharmaceutical ingredients, or APIs, the actual core chemical that makes the medicine work. It's estimated that over 80% of the APIs for America's generic drugs, from basic antibiotics to blood pressure medication, have their origins in China. Building a new, FDA-approved API supply chain is a multi-year, multi-billion-dollar process. You can't just flip a switch. This is what the economists at Bloomberg, Chang Shu and David Chu, were getting at when they said, China's strong position in global supply chains gives it some bargaining power. That's a very polite, economist way of saying China has Uncle Sam over a barrel on certain things. Realigning production will take time, they added. Time is the key word. And in a trade war, time is leverage. This isn't just about exotic minerals or complex chemicals. Look at electronics. While total shipments of smartphones and laptops are down, China still shipped nearly $8 billion worth of them to the US in the last quarter alone. Why? Because even if a phone is assembled in Vietnam, a huge percentage of its internal components, the circuit boards, the camera modules, the tiny connectors, are still coming from the Pearl River Delta. Moving final assembly is one thing, moving the entire, hyper-efficient ecosystem of 1,000 specialized component suppliers is a generational challenge. And here's where it gets really interesting. Some sectors are not just surviving, they're thriving. Exports of e-bikes to the US are up, hitting over $500 million in Q3. Refined copper cathodes Valory? They went from practically zero to $270 million in 3 months. Electrical cables? Up 87% to $405 million. This isn't a picture of an economy on the ropes. This is a picture of an economy that is deeply, fundamentally, and, for now, inextricably linked with its biggest rival. Okay, so we've established that some Chinese goods are simply inelastic, as the economists say. You have to buy them. But that doesn't explain the whole $1 billion a day story. A 55% price hike is a 55% price hike. It should hurt more. So, are American companies just gritting their teeth and eating costs that are 55% higher? Some are. But many, it turns out, are getting creative. Welcome to the great game of tariff whack-a-mole, where for every loophole the government tries to plug, 2 more pop up. First, let's talk about transshipping. This is the oldest trick in the book, now supercharged for the 21st century. A container full of, let's say, tariffed furniture leaves the port of Ningbo. But it doesn't sail straight for Long Beach. It takes a little detour. A tropical vacation to, say, Port Klang in Malaysia, or maybe a quick stop in Haiphong, Vietnam. There, the container is offloaded, the paperwork is massaged, and suddenly, those made in China goods are magically reborn as made in Vietnam. They get a new bill of lading, a new certificate of origin, and then they're loaded onto a new ship bound for the US. When they arrive, they're subject to Vietnam's tariff rate, which is much, much lower. Is it legal? Absolutely not. Is it happening? On a massive scale. Then there's the more sophisticated stuff. As Zhao Pengxing, a strategist at ANZ Bank, pointed out, there are all sorts of loopholes. My favorite is the first sale rule. This one is a gem. Picture this: an American clothing brand, let's call it Yankee Style, wants to import 100,000 t-shirts. The factory in China sells the shirts to a trading company, a middleman, often based in Hong Kong or Singapore, for $3 a shirt. This is the first sale. That middleman then turns around and sells the same shirts to Yankee Style for $8 a shirt. Now, under US customs law, the importer can, in many cases, declare the value of the goods based on that first sale price. So, Trump's 55% tariff is applied to the 3 value, not the 8 value. The importer saves $2.75 per shirt. Multiply that by hundreds of thousands of containers, and you're talking about billions of dollars in bypass tariffs. The US Treasury gets a fraction of what it's supposed to, and the final price for the American consumer doesn't go up as much as you'd think. US Customs and Border Protection is a formidable organization, but they are facing a tsunami of goods. They have about 2.5 million import entries filed every month. They simply do not, as Xing said, have enough manpower to address them all. It's a high-stakes game of cat and mouse, and the mice are very, very clever. But the sneakiest, most modern workaround isn't happening in a foggy port in Southeast Asia. It's happening on your phone. I'm talking about the e-commerce behemoths, Shein and Temu. Now, you'll remember that one of Trump's first moves in his first term was to go after the de minimis rule. That was the loophole that allowed small packages, valued under $800, to enter the US completely duty-free. It was the secret sauce for Shein and Temu's explosive growth. You order a $10 dress and a $5 phone case, and it zips right to your mailbox, no tariff, no problem. In May of 2025, the Trump administration slammed that door shut. Any package, no matter how small, coming directly from China would face the full 55% tariff. Everyone thought this was the death knell for these fast fashion giants. They thought wrong. While they took a hit, US consumers have kept buying. Chinese customs data shows that even with the loophole closed, about $5.4 billion worth of these small packages were sent to the US since May. So what's their new trick? It's a two-parter. First, they're playing the "we're not technically Chinese" card. Shein is headquartered in Singapore now. They route logistics and payments through entities outside of China, muddying the waters of origin. But the bigger play is a fundamental shift in logistics. Instead of shipping 1 million individual packages from China, they are now shipping 1,000 massive containers to warehouses in Mexico, or even inside the US. That bulk shipment pays the tariff. But once it's inside, say, a warehouse in Texas, it's broken down into 1 million individual packages and mailed to American customers via the US Postal Service or FedEx. To you, the customer, it feels the same: you click buy and a package shows up. But on the back end, they've transformed their business model to navigate the tariff wall. And we're seeing proof in the data. Business-to-business e-commerce exports from China to the US mysteriously skyrocketed from about $31 million in August to over $201 million in September. That's not a bunch of factories buying paper clips from each other. That's the new bulk shipping model in action. The digital Silk Road didn't get blocked, it just built a detour. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. Boss, you're making it sound like Trump's tariffs are a complete failure. Not so fast. It's crucial to look at the full picture. While China has shown incredible resilience, the damage is real, and the decoupling Trump wants is happening, just not everywhere, and not all at once. The overall trade numbers tell part of the story. Shipments from China this year are down to about $320 billion. That's a huge drop, putting us back at 2017 levels, before the first trade war even began. Where is the decoupling working? It's working for products where a plan B is actually viable. Take video game consoles. In the first Trump term, Nintendo and Microsoft got hit with tariffs and started moving. By 2025, that process is complete. They've shifted lines to Vietnam and elsewhere. So, when the 55% tariff hit, it was a non-issue. Exports of game consoles from China to the US have collapsed. Your new Xbox or PlayStation is far more likely to have been assembled in Southeast Asia. Same thing with TVs. US consumers are now buying their big screens from Mexico, Vietnam, and other countries. Exports of LCD sets from China to the US cratered by a staggering 73% last quarter. Why? Because assembling a TV is a relatively standardized process. It was hard to move, but companies had the 5-year heads up from the first trade war to do it. The IMF put out a report this month confirming this. They said, and I quote, bilateral trade decoupling between the United States and China appears to be happening sooner when compared with the 2018-19 tariff shock. So, Trump's policy is working, but only in specific sectors. It's like a diet. You might be losing weight on your arms and legs, but you've still got that stubborn belly fat that just won't go away. So, what's the bottom line here? What does this all mean as President Xi Jinping's negotiators head into talks to try and cool things down? It means President Xi has a much stronger hand than anyone in Washington expected. The Chinese economy is hurting, yes, but it is not broken. The resilience of its most critical export sectors, combined with the creative ingenuity of its businesses to bypass tariffs, has given Beijing breathing room. They can absorb more pain. The $67 billion trade surplus they ran with the US in the last quarter alone proves that. This isn't a simple story of good guys and bad guys. It's a lesson in the brutal complexity of the modern global economy. A tariff is a blunt instrument in a world of intricate, interwoven supply chains. For decades, the world, led by American companies, built a hyper-efficient economic engine with China at its core. Now, we're trying to rip that engine out and replace it while the car is still speeding down the highway. It's a messy, difficult, and incredibly expensive process. The Trump administration's goal of onshoring critical industries and reviving American manufacturing is a long-term project. It will take more than tariffs. It will take a decade or more of sustained industrial policy, investment, and training. What we are witnessing is not a quick trade skirmish. It's the beginning of a prolonged economic Cold War. Both sides are probing for weaknesses, learning to adapt, and digging in for a long struggle. The tariffs are the first salvo, but the real battle will be fought over technology, supply chain control, and economic influence for decades to come. The picket fence didn't stop the tidal wave. It just redirected the water, carving out new, unexpected channels. And we're all going to be dealing with the flood. That's the full picture. This is Boss Economic World. Stay informed, and I'll see you next time.